So what I wanted to do was to sort of look at what these two companies are doing, how and the context of their markets. If you, I was looking at some numbers just before I came online, at looking at this, like sort of the rate of growth of venture capital investment in Mexico and Nigeria, which seemingly in two different continents are very sort of different markets, but actually there's a lot of commonality between both of them. Mexico has seen, since January 29, venture capital just rocket up by in the last 5 years, it's increased by about 560%. Since January 2019, it's top $4.5 billion investment. In that same period, Nigeria has seen venture capital investment of $2.4 billion. And both of these companies have benefited from that and are designated in valuation terms as unicorns now. Companies worth more than $1 billion, startups worth more than $1 billion. At the center of what's driving this is obviously the important transformation of financial services and the potential of their impact on their respective economies, and not just their national economies, but also the regional sort of impact. And that's some of what we want to get into today. Since you're online, let me start with you. Just started very simply talking about sort of the journey, Flutterwave, a short version of the Flutterwave journey, and how you find yourselves as this leader of the market today.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Endeavor, and thank you, Yinka, as well. The short version of the story would be about 6 years ago, we identified a problem that I think had been existing for quite a while. And it was simply the fact that within the continent as Africa, we couldn't engage in commerce as simply as counterparts in the West could. That's the problem statement. And we realized that we needed to solve for that problem. And that meant creating the infrastructure that would help commerce within the continent and also exporting out of the continent. I don't know how many people are familiar with it, but in order to send money to Ghana, traditionally, you would need to first from Lagos, it would go to New York and then come down to Ghana. And those things were things that I think everybody was used to, and it just became the norm. But we realized that there was more efficient ways to do that. And so we dived in, and 5 years later, February this year, we find ourselves being called a unicorn. And the one thing that I can say is, nothing has changed, even though everything has changed. The vision and the mission is still quite simple and still clear. There's still so much to do on the continent. There's still so much commerce that we need to begin to push. There's so much that needs to happen. Listening to what Tommy was saying with Bankly, there's still so much financial inclusion that needs to happen. And so I would say that, even though we're fortunate to be where we are today, we're only still scratching the surface. And I'm even more excited about the next 5 years.
Excellent. An excellent sort of intro. Adolfo, welcome. I wanted to get you to also do the sort of short version, and maybe with a little bit more detail about, a little bit more context about the Mexican market, because obviously many of our listeners are in the Nigerian market, are very familiar with Flutterwave. But yes, tell us the clip story and some context about your role and your place in that market.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for the invitation. So the company, I founded the company back in 2012. So it seems like it's actually ages ago. Prior to that, I was working at PayPal in the Bay Area. I was the employee number 3 for PayPal in Latin America. So this was the early days for PayPal also in the region. And through my years at PayPal, I came to realize, I was new to payments, how how really hard it was not only to make a payment, but most importantly, how to accept payments. Throughout the world, in general, this is a constant throughout the world. And in the case of Latin America and in the case specifically of Mexico, which is my home country, it was particularly acute and had to do with a macro economic dysfunction at the industry level, given how, and I'm not going to go deep into it, but how the industry is organized is very different than from most parts of the world, the payments industry. And as a result, only a handful of merchants accepted payments, electronic payments, or cards. So that's after about 4 years in PayPal, I left to start the Clip, to start the company. And what started as a real payment acceptance mechanism for small merchants, we only cater to small and medium businesses, but mostly small businesses. At the beginning, and that was basically the idea. It slowly but surely became a much larger enterprise or a much larger venture than what any of us, including myself, expected. We started to see how big could Clip get by the end of 2016, when we became the 5th largest acquirer of merchants in Mexico by number of merchants, with only 35 people in the team, 40 people in the team. So, and we're already, behind some of the largest banks in the world that operate in the country. And there we started seeing that we were acquiring a massive amount of customers, that the product was really getting a lot of traction. With that came, of course, funding also. Historically, Clip had been the company that had brought Silicon Valley money into Mexico. And with that came money and investment from the large growth funds around the world. And by the end of 2018, early 2019, we became the largest acquirer by number of merchants. And today we are about 4 times the size of the largest what used to be the largest acquired by number of merchants in the country. With that scale, as you can imagine, the vision changed and it became much more broad, in the sense that it's not only about payments, but also helping merchants, provide merchants with solutions to a bunch of their pressing needs, not only payments, but also financing, commerce, online payments, online sales, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So Clip is starting to become what we call the operating system for commerce in Mexico. Today, roughly 1 out of 2 merchants that accept payments in Mexico do it through Clip. And that share is going to increase over the next 2 or 3 years substantially. So we believe we have a chance of becoming something much, much larger, of course, that only helping merchants accept payments. But it really started with that.
That's, it's a fascinating story. What was the reason? The core of the business idea was you pitched it to internally at PayPal, right?
So the idea was, so at the end of 2008, early 2009, we were doing what we call e-commerce seminars in Mexico. And this was specifically in the Cancun region, in the Mayan Riviera. And the idea of those seminars was to really help people understand how the PayPal product worked. We brought with us a hack that we had done on an iPhone, where you could accept payments on site versus the traditional PayPal product, and it was a big success as a trial. However, when we went back, like I said, I was really new to payments. I didn't do a very good job selling it internally, and my boss told me, "Dude, you gotta focus on opening up Mexico. We have to deliver opening up Mexico, and we're also opening up Brazil." So that project got a little bit put to the side, and we focused on launching PayPal. And about a year later, Square launched in the United States.
Right. What I wanted to do in terms of talking about your respective journeys is talk about it through the lens of products. So if let me come back to you and just ask about the 2 or 3 products that you've launched at Flutterwave, they've really sort of either changed the trajectory of the company or sort of accelerated it. That really sort of made you understand that, yeah, we've got the right thing here, and these are the next things we're going to be doing.
Okay, so I think, you know, when I was speaking earlier about, you know, what we saw to be the problem, which was ensuring that, you know, a lot more commerce could happen on the continent. The way that we sought to solve that was to be a payments infrastructure company. And if I could use an analogy, when you think about, you know, a plumbing system, you know, you typically go to the faucet or the sink and you turn the tap. But rarely do you think about, you know, the pipes that are in the wall that go all the way and carry the water. And that's essentially what we built. And that's what Flutterwave is at its core. But we very quickly realized that, you know, on the continent in Nigeria, there was not a lot to ride on that infrastructure. The earliest fintechs that, you know, were created, I'm quite proud to say, even though, you know, there is competition amongst us, started on our platform, riding on our infrastructure as Flutterwave. But we realized that there was so much more to do in the market. And so we launched what is today called Flutterwave for Business, which is our flagship product. It's a platform that allows merchants collect and make payments. It's simply a gateway service, but we're not a gateway business. It's actually a product that sits on our infrastructure. And our target was to focus on enterprises because we believe that there was a, you know, a waterfall effect, if you may. If the enterprises were there, then it would cascade down.
I see.
And so we sought out, you know, customers like Uber at the time, and Uber is still one of our biggest customers today. And we transact with them, you know, across the continent, not just in Nigeria, where it all started. And I think what was unique about that product was, again, understanding that Africa was very unique. Mobile money was never going to be kicked out in the east of Africa. In Nigeria, cards and bank transfers were neck and neck. And I could even argue today that bank transfers might even be, you know, winning that battle. And understanding that the payment space did not need anyone to tell customers how to transact. Instead, it needed to enable merchants simply receive whatever type of payment the customers had. And so being able to integrate the different payment types into our platform, whether you are in Kenya or you are in Nigeria or you are in South Africa, made it make sense for enterprises. They did not need to find multiple partners in different countries. Thinking from their perspective, where engineering resource and developers is not something that, you know, is an everyday thing. You realize very quickly that if I can do one integration and that exposes me to multiple markets, and as new markets come on, you simply just tack them on, that became a very good selling point. I would say the second thing that sort of, you know, also added to it, because like I said, you know, the Flutterwave for Business was our flagship product, and we did focus on enterprises. But with the pandemic last year, we created the Flutterwave store, which is similar to Shopify, but it was free. Because again, we saw that, you know, digitization happened so quickly, and the pandemic came so quickly, and small businesses were caught out. They could not sell, they couldn't get rid of their inventory, they couldn't feed, they couldn't make money. And so we created the Flutterwave store as our answer to that. And very quickly, you know, within the first 4 months, we had seen over 20,000 stores. And, you know, that also changed. Again, we didn't play very heavy in the retail space and the SME space, and that sort of changed the trajectory of the business. There's so much more that we've done in the time, but I would leave those two as, you know, two of the biggest things that have, you know, been very impactful to our business. And I would say that, especially with both systems, right, with our gateway, what makes it interesting is we keep adding payment types because payment types don't end. You know, we added Discover, PayPal, MTN Momo, Airtel Momo, and those things just keep coming, and
Sure.
that flexibility that we give the merchants, I think is what has been the winning formula.
Yeah, I do want to come back to that because I'm just conscious of time, but I'm fascinated by. I mean, how's Flutterwave store been doing in terms of actually growing? In terms of, you talked about the 20,000 very quickly, but has it kept growing?
So today, what we've seen is, I believe today those numbers are about 60,000.
Okay.
But what we've also seen is actual growth, business growth, where a merchant has come onto the platform,
the individual growth,
their products, and they've transitioned into other products that we have at Flutterwave because their businesses have expanded.
Okay.
So it's not the case where we're seeing just a merchant come on the store and stay on the store. We've seen quite a number of merchants migrate as their business
evolve.
Expanded, essentially.
Let me take that to Adolfo. What's one or two products would you say it's kind of changed the trajectory of the company, or sort of accelerated what you were already doing?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to talk about one that really changed the trajectory of the company, and then another one that really changed the trajectory of our thinking more than the company. So the one that changed the trajectory of the company was a hardware product. So we had a dongle that connects to the phone, and then a Bluetooth reader that connects to the phone via Bluetooth. Things were going great. This was back 2017. However, in 18, one thing we started seeing, Yinka, was that the merchants were really, really small, the ones that were transacting, and we were starting to get questions from merchants or inquiries from merchants for devices that can really transact more and be a little bit more robust. So in 2018, we launched a full-fledged Android phone, which is a full POS terminal that has payment. The payment system is integrated into the phone, and that, of course, with a screen allows you to do a lot of software stuff. Okay, but that really changed the trajectory of the company in terms of the type of users we were starting to get. We started getting users that were about 4 to 5 times larger than the ones that we were getting on the other readers, with the same price, because we're not changing the price that we were charging them. And the retention as a result also was much better, because these were larger merchants, so they tend to be a little bit more established and more stable, right?
Right.
And that.
What was that called? What's that called?
It is called the Clip Pro, and that really changed the trajectory in terms of our curves, our LTV and CAC curves. And that allowed, and really, and most importantly, more than that, it really expanded our vision into, hey, we might be able to serve larger merchants than what we thought, not only the very, very small guys. So that's one. And the other one that was more than the trajectory of the company really changed the trajectory of our thinking. It was a very, very, very simple product, which is in Africa, this is also a very common product, which is top-ups. We gave merchants the ability to top up their phones, their clients' phones, but instead of us keeping the revenue, we share the revenue with them. We give them all the revenue for that. We don't keep a single peso of the revenue. And the adoption that we saw of that product, but most importantly, Yinka, the correlation between how the merchant transacts and how we retain the merchant once they start using more than one product, it's just skyrockets.
Very similar to what Ife just said with Flutterwave.
So that's when we really started saying, hey, well, this might actually be the way to go to start complementing better hardware solutions with different use cases, not a single use case, with different software products. And that combination has been the killing recipe, if you want to call it, for us. But this second product, the top-up product, in terms of revenue or TPV, it has really not changed things materially, but it has informed a lot of our decisions in terms of roadmap about what to prioritize and when. And it has to do with the retention factor that I just mentioned.
That's so interesting, and it's interesting that the sort of commonalities in terms of the journey there.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about expansion, and I'll come back to Ife and just sort of ask. I know that you've expanded to several African countries, so maybe you can just update in terms of where you are now and how many countries and perhaps where else you're going and what's your I guess because you've done this fairly rapidly, what's this kind of lessons learned, the short version of the lessons learned. I'm sure you've got whole books of lessons learned.
Let me just clarify. Lessons learned with regards to expansion.
Yes.
Okay. We're in 15 countries in terms of our operations, meaning that we have some type of operation there, 15 countries.
Okay. All in Africa?
All across the world, the US, and the UK, Lithuania included. Kenya, do I have to list all of them with the 15?
I mean, you can say the biggest ones.
The biggest ones obviously would be the South Africas, the Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana. But Francophone is very interesting for us. Cameroon, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, Malawi, Zambia. But what's interesting is we're actually able to do payments in about 33. Right, so we have operations in 15, but we're able to do payments in 33, both collections and payouts. I would say the biggest lesson is something that we've always known, but I think being on ground and seeing it as you go every day is that Africa is just different. And that's the biggest lesson for us, which is being able
Short version, Africa is not a country.
It's not. It's weird that we say this thing, which is it's not a country, but we make it feel like one. That's what we say, but yes, essentially it's different, and you have to be very cognizant of all the nuances, whether it's regulatory, whether it's culture, even as simple as culture, even as simple as marketing in the right way, in the right language. These things are super important. I would say that's the biggest lesson for us.
Adolfo, you've been obviously booming in Mexico. What's the roadmap for you in terms of Latin America? And I'm curious how you see Latin America in terms of when you think about expansion. Do you just look at the biggest markets in Latin America, or do you think, hey, we're just going to stick to Central America first and then think about South America? I mean, how do you think about the world in that part of the world?
That is exactly one of Latin America's biggest problems, which is if you want to open in Brazil, it's completely different if you want to open in Argentina, and it's completely different if you want to open it in Mexico. So each country is kind of its own continent. Brazil and Mexico have for them that they're really big countries with a lot of people. So it's worth it to open up a new operation. Argentina, to a less extent, but maybe so. The rest of the countries are relatively small. So the effort you have to make to open each one of them, since you don't have common regulations, you of course don't have common currencies, you don't have common law, you don't have anything in common. This is especially the most extreme pieces is the countries in Central America, Guatemala, Salvador, etc. But to some extent, this also can be applied to other countries in South America, such as Peru, Ecuador, etc. So opening up each country, it's a titanic effort. So until we absolutely become dominant in Mexico, I think we're going to stick to Mexico. And the reason, if you see payment companies throughout the globe, there are only two really global payments companies in the world. That's Visa and MasterCard. Payments tend to be very, very local by definition. Maybe if we go out with another solution, we could do something different, meaning commerce or lending or all that. But with our payments product, it's really hard to start operating in multiple countries at the same time. And the story of companies like us, at least so far, tell you that the companies that become really focused are the ones that become the winners. You have the case of Square, of course, in the United States, as you know, they have become very dominant. You have the case of Stone and PagoSeguro in Brazil. On the other hand, you have the case of iSettle, which expanded to multiple countries, got acquired by PayPal a few years ago, very successfully, but in this big scheme of things, they were not that successful. Same thing with the guys at SumUp. So for us right now, it's really about becoming incredibly dominant in Mexico and really securing our position, and then we'll see.
So not even what I mean, obviously that raises the question of whether M&A is the way to go to get into markets.
It could be. Yes, absolutely. M&A, but the issue is not so much about money. It's about time, right? The management team time, and the time we have to think about problems and issues and things we really want to do. We're not done with Mexico yet. We still have a lot of things to do, and I think in the interest of shareholders, it's best if we really focus down on nailing it down.
I want to stay with you for a second because I wanted to get into that topic I know you're passionate about, which is just talking about the important role of fintech platforms like yours and obviously Flutterwave and many others in enabling the wider economy. In these emerging and particularly that you guys have a kind of potential to have a disproportionate impact, which is where I think a lot of the valuations are coming from, right?
Yep.
Because investors are looking at it and saying like these guys could transform these economies, not just their local markets. Can you speak to that and what your experience in Mexico has been and how you think that applies to other countries, other emerging markets, other developing markets around the world?
Yeah, it's a really interesting time, and I don't know if Ife would probably agree with this, but a couple of years ago, no more, 3 years ago, 2017, okay, with COVID, everything seems like ages ago, but 2017
happened very quickly.
I was in New York at the Latin America Venture Capital Conference, the LAFCA conference, a really good conference. And in a panel, and there was this, I don't know who was interviewing, I think it was Alan from Endeavor actually, but somebody was interviewing me. And and what I told him about fintech is that fintech companies in emerging markets were going to become much larger than fintech companies in developed markets. And a lot of VCs, start rolling their eyes like, oh my God, here he goes again with his crazy shit. Especially local VCs, which some of them are not very sophisticated, and the reasoning is very simple. It is really very, very simple. So in developed markets like the United States, for example, when you have a fintech company, by definition, that company is going to serve a niche because the vast majority of consumers or businesses are already being served. It might be a very large niche because the United States, for example, is a humongous economy. So it can become a really big company. But at the end of the day, it's a niche company. And my argument back then was what happens in emerging markets is that the vast majority of the population are either unserved or underserved. 95% are fall in those two categories. Now, if it's under or unserved, I think it varies greatly between each emerging market, but the vast majority of potential customers fall in those two categories. And when you have a company like the ones we have here today, we might start with a niche, but then the company start becoming so large that they actually could serve the entire market. And my argument back then was look at the case of Ant Financial in China. And yes, China is a very weird case, right? And it's a very specific market. But you're starting to see things or things like that in the case of countries like India. In the case of Brazil, for example, you have Paytm, Nubank, which is serves more customers than probably the two largest banks together. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but it's really large. In the case of Mexico, you have Clip, more than 4 times. We have more merchants than the top 5 banks combined. So, and I know Ife is probably seeing something similar. And these companies, and this is why I think the valuations are so high and all that, a lot of them are not going to realize this. Okay, I mean, it's not going to not realize. It's not going to materialize, and many of these companies could eventually fail or don't become that big. That being said, there's a real chance that this happens, and we already have tangible examples. And was the first one, but yes, China is a little bit different. You have Nubank in Brazil, you have Paytm in India, and we're going to start companies like this, and this is why they're commanding such high premiums, such high valuations, and there are all these expectations going for all these companies. And I think it's a very, very unique opportunity for having companies that didn't exist 10 years ago become incredibly large and dominant in their respective markets in a very short period of time. So we're going to see the rise of local Googles, local Facebooks, meaning not in the business model, but in how dominant the companies become, and how large they become. Or local and financials, if you want to call it. Okay, and Nubank is one example. Clip is one example. I'm sure here we're going to have another example. So, and this is a thesis I have had for a few years now, and I think it's starting to materialize. Yeah.
I mean, if I do want to add anything to that, any takes in terms of, especially in terms of the African experience, right? Like, what is it? Just when I think about it, going back to my last question when I asked about, the Africa as a country, Quip, but is it going to be, to Adolfo's point, is it going to be just a Nigeria sort of like dominant, or are we going to have a kind of Africa-wide? Just because the markets are less developed.
I think Adolfo's like hit the nail on the head, right? Mm-hmm. But I can say it's not going to be just Nigeria. Borrowing again from Adolfo, Nigeria's case is sort of like a China case in Africa. It has so many people, so the cumulative impact is always going to be bigger because Nigeria is just so big. But there is massive development happening. When you think about what M-Pesa was able to achieve in Kenya, that was not Nigeria, right? And I think what's very interesting, if I can just tack on what Adolfo said, is when you look at developing markets or developed markets, I think the way fintechs are more or less enhancing what is available. They are exactly, they're layering on all these things. Whereas in Africa, it's almost like a creation. It's like these things are just brand new. And so when you think about financial inclusion in Nigeria, which is an advanced market by all standards in Africa, I mean, the banking system in Nigeria is quite advanced, even globally. There's still, 40% of a population, depending on which metric you're using, 200 million people. The entire African continent has over 1 billion people and has the largest population of youth, right? And these are services, financial services that are not available. Like you said, it's either unserved or underserved. So it's almost because things are being created that impact that fintechs are going to have on the continent is much larger. Again, understanding that Visa and MasterCard, even though Adolfo said that they're the truly global companies globally, trying to understanding that a card is never going to do what a phone like in Safaricom phone using M-Pesa is going to do. Understanding that the competition is not between Visa and Pay with Bank Transfer in Nigeria. Understanding that MTN Momo is going to be MTN Momo, and the people that use it don't want to use that, right? So understanding that being able to tap into that entire market is what the fintechs in Africa have to play with. So even if you end up being a niche, fintech player in a particular country or a particular region, I think the cumulative impact is still going to be much, much larger. And I don't think that, the Ant Financial, story is so far-fetched even from Africa. Because when you look at the entire thing and where technology is, Ant Financial started many years ago, and technology is not what technology is today. There's so many more advancements in technology that make, progress even quicker. Right, so it's still possible. I'm not saying don't quote me on the financial thing, but it's possible.
Right. No, fantastic points. I think we probably are very close to having to wrap up for time. But I suppose let me ask you the one of the things that Endeavor was keen to highlight here was to talk about the future. And I'll stay with you, if just to as we wrap up, and to ask about what's in the future of Flutterwave. We're seeing stories of more funding. Are you looking at M&A, new markets? What are the priorities here as you think about the future for Flutterwave?
I think that's the one question we get asked the most as a company. And if we saw 5 years today, 5 years ago, we would be wizards. The future is, like I said, I think when I started the introduction, even in the short version, the vision hasn't changed. And that's because we're barely scratching the surface. Africa is still not able to do commerce globally, as smoothly as we would like. In Nigeria today, it's possible, in Kenya and Egypt, but Africa has many more countries and many more people. And so that vision still remains in terms of being able to plug the entire thing. When I think about our journey with Uber as an example, we were in Nigeria, and then we took out incumbents in Kenya and South Africa, and we're doing the same thing in many more countries, right? And for me, it's because our solution works. What we're trying to build is real. And on the back of that, there is real impact that needs to be had. When you think of what Ant Financial was able to achieve in China, beyond just the commerce bit, the impact that it had on the people was massive. And because at Flutterwave, we are very, very deliberate about ensuring that we have impact on the continent. It means that there's so much work to do. I do not believe that even at where we've gotten to, processed well over, I think it's $12 billion now in transactions, and the number of places that we are in, that we are scratching the surface. There's still too much to do. So the future is going to look like a lot more expansion, as many more payment types as are possible, allowing Mexicans come to Africa and not think about how they're going to spend, allowing Africans go to Mexico and not think about how they're going to spend, creating many more partnerships, because I've understood better than anything that fintech is partnerships. You cannot do it by yourself. So creating many more partnerships, and if that comes via organic means, great. If it comes via M&As, great. Obviously, if we continue to grow at the pace that we're growing, then definitely there'll be many more opportunities to raise capital and do big things. And touch wood, long may it continue.
As we talk about raising capital, what is the priority there? Is it just about expansion into new markets, or is it about acquisitions when you think about potentially raising new capital?
There's not one way. I think that Adolfo mentioned it when he said, if you're going to go into Argentina, it's very different. You're not going to go into Argentina the way that you're going to go into Europe, right? Even if they're neighbors. So it's the same way. I can't say that it's definitely for acquisitions or that's definitely for expansion, but to me, expansion is both. It's both organic and inorganic, and we will deploy capital accordingly.
Excellent. It looks like we've got 5 more minutes, so I will ask Adolfo the same question about the future, and then maybe we'll just wrap up with a question about leadership. Adolfo, the future of Clip, what's on the cards? What's most likely on the cards?
So I think the in terms of business is to keep executing on basically 2 fronts. Number one is the payment acceptance side, as I mentioned earlier, and making sure that we really have a much larger footprint in terms of number of merchants, payment methods available to merchants, and devices for them to transact. Okay, so that's one piece. The other one is the software component, which is that as we roll out new products and services, we see an increased engagement throughout the platform, and of course then more volume, more revenue, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of on the business side. And I think on the PR side, if you want to call it all of that, we have been usually very low profile in terms of our announcements and what we do. We only announced the most recent round. We didn't announce anything before that since 2016. And I think you're going to start seeing a little bit more about the company. We're trying to raise the profile of Clip to make sure that we get this story out there. So you're going to start seeing a lot more coverage probably in the press and in the media regarding the company. About what? I really cannot tell you.
Yeah, this journalist automatically thinks this is all. Maybe I'm thinking about M&A the wrong way. Are you on the market? Why are you trying to raise the profile of the business? What's the strategic thinking there?
It becomes a lot easier, Yinka, to number one, raise money. It's very simple, and number two, it's talent attraction.
Okay.
People really like to say they work for a unicorn. We didn't pay a lot of attention to it, frankly, until we realized through our surveys that we do with employees and talking with them that this, bragging, if you want to call it, about what we are, it was important for them and for them to show. And I think that is the reason why we're doing this. Or what we did the previous run, and we're going to keep doing it. And it has given us good results so far since we announced around the hiring and the inbounds we get from funds and banks has been a lot larger. So yeah, it has been a good strategy.
Okay, that's if I'm just going to wrap up with. I was going to ask about leadership, but I think a more specific thing for you guys at Flutterwave is this whole thing about cross-border payments, because we were just talking about Africa there, moving money around the continent. Like, you've done all this work and you've, been very successful in terms of expanding, but it's still not as smooth as it could be to move money around to pay for things between countries. And sometimes I see the announcements, not just for Flutterwave, of course, by numerous companies, numerous startups, and it's all very exciting. And then I try to pay for something and I can't pay, buy something off someone's website in Nigeria or whatever. And I'm like, wait, what's going on? I thought you guys had solved all the world's problems. Now obviously this is tongue in cheek, but this is a serious point. Like how far away are we from you guys really helping to play a key role in enabling the kind of cross-border payments that we I guess we all want and deserve, and we think we deserve.
So as soon as you said tongue in cheek, I was going to respond and say I'm sure it wasn't a Flutterwave gateway that you were using at the time. But I think, look, realistically, I think for me the reason why it's still not as smooth is because between certain more advanced countries and regions, there's a lot more synergy. There's still parts of Africa that are on lists so we can't do business with them, but there's still commerce happening between those countries. And in some cases, ultimately, we don't hold money, right? We're still facilitators, and there's a need to carry everybody along on this journey, partners, providers, regulators, and just carry everybody along. And so the truth is, everybody is still learning this thing. This fintech thing is not 40 years old or 100 years old. It's not banking, right? So these things are still being learned by everybody. And so that in some cases, in some instances, you still have those challenges. But I think we're further along than we used to be. And I think we're closer to the end. In terms of, being able to enable global type of payments, this Apple Pay, this Google Pay, all the card networks are available. We're quickly integrating all the mobile money types available as well. And I refer to LATAM and Asia as well, bringing all those things on board and truly making it a global system of payment. And once we're able to do those things, I think we would be closer to the end. There are quite a number of announcements that we're going to make before the year is over. And we did make the Alibaba announcement about 2 years ago. It allows you to make payments via that. So I think we're closer to the end than I would have imagined from a long time ago.
I think to be fair to you, you did make, I think it was you or Adolfo that did say that fintech is all about partnerships and
It was this guy. It was not
it was this guy. No, because I mean, because I think that backs up, it backs up what you're saying. Adolfo, let me ask you that the big leadership lessons that you've learned on your journey as a founder with Mexico's most successful fintech today.
So I think I think every single founder will tell you this. The hardest piece is not fundraising. The hardest piece is not product market fit. The hardest piece is not marketing. The hardest piece is by far managing people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like by far meaning orders of magnitude harder. It's like math in first grade and math advanced calculus. That's kind of the difference, right? And I learned that lesson the hard way. For me, it was. I had a really good boss at PayPal, who said to me this over and over, and I always said, "Oh, this guy's bullshitting," until I actually was in the hot seat and I actually saw it firsthand. And for me, it's really about who you hire, who do you retain, and who do you let go, and who do you promote, and the type of culture that you put in your company, and the time you devote to it. For me, that's the lesson after this 9 years. If you do that right, the other 99.9% of the things will almost fall into place. You still have to do a couple of things good, but the rest will almost fall into place by its own. I learned, like I said, the lesson the hard way, because I've made so many mistakes in the early days in this area. I think I've more than corrected course. We have a magnificent team culture and employee satisfaction at the company. But for me, that is the absolute key. And the thing with the culture in a company is that every single company has a culture, every single one of them. And you can have a deliberate culture, meaning one that you want to foster, regardless if somebody else likes it or not, that doesn't matter. If you really foster something or you don't. So culture is like, it's like weed. The one that grows at homes. If you let it grow by itself, it's going to eat the house, it's going to become horrendous, and it's going to destroy everything. If you nourish it, if you cut it up, your house is going to look beautiful with all those plants outside. Culture is the same thing. If you don't deliberately do something about it, most likely you're going to end up with a Frankenstein that is going to come back and eat you. And that is the biggest lesson I learned. And at some point, I was devoting probably 70%, a few years ago, 70% of my time to this. 70 to managing and the people that I spend probably the most time still to this day is my head of HR. So I do mean this seriously, because it's the lesson that I've learned.
No, thank you. I mean, we've run out of time, but if I feel it's important to give you a chance to just maybe 30 seconds of wisdom. on leadership.
That's pressure. I would say I couldn't agree more with Adolfo. For me, the two key things that I look at, and they both relate to people as well, is empathy and being self-aware. As a leader, there's so much more that you're emanating and communicating. So people say communicate, but it's because of the people, right? So you have to be self-aware. All these other things that you're doing it yourself, but empathy is something that last year really escalated for me as a leader, and just understanding it a bit better.